The night I lost my job, I didn't mention the company I secretly owned, or the beachfront house in my name. My father yelled, "Pack your bags. Failures don't belong here." My wife spat at me and left with her lover. What happened next, they'll regret for the rest of their lives. I stood there in the doorway of the Mercer mansion, the rain beating against the windows like it had a grudge against the world. Inside, the grand chandelier caught the light from the storm's flashes, throwing jagged shadows across the room. The heavy scent of roasted lamb and expensive wine hung in the air, mixing with the tension, thick and suffocating. Dad, sitting at the head of the table, didn't bother to hide his contempt. His suit was pressed perfectly, his tie tight, his posture straight as a blade. He didn't even flinch when I walked in. "You're late," he said, like it was an accusation, not just a fact. I nodded, my eyes on the polished floor. "Traffic," I lied, knowing he wouldn't believe me. Colby, my older brother, grinned at me from across the table. His smile was sharp, a wolf in a tailored suit. "Traffic, huh? Guess it's hard to get good parking when you don't have a job anymore." The room tittered with a polite, poisonous laugh, but it felt like a slap across my face. My mother didn't say a word. She never did when Colby spoke. Her fork froze in midair, her eyes flickering between two of us, but she didn't dare intervene. It wasn't her fight. I sat down across from Renee, my wife. She looked perfect as always, her hair a glossy cascade, a dress expensive but understated. But her eyes, they didn't meet mine. They couldn't even be bothered to look up. The silence between us felt like a chasm, growing wider by the second. I let it hang for a while, the quiet stretching longer than it should have. The storm outside had reached a steady downpour, its rhythm sensing with the pulse hammering in my chest. I needed to say something, break the thick air. "I got let go today," I said, and the sound of silverware hitting china came to a halt. My father's hand paused over his glass, and he looked at me as though the words tasted sore. "Let go," he repeated. It was like the idea of me being anything but successful was anathema to him. I could see it in his face, the judgment, the disgust. Failures didn't belong here. It was the same thing he'd told me every time I'd fame his impossible expectations. A slow burn in my chest, hot and bitter, threatened to explode, but I didn't let it. Then he slammed his hand onto the table, the force making the dishes rattle. "Failures don't belong here," he repeated, his voice cold. No one spoke. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. I could feel the eyes on me now. My mother, Colby, Renee. They all waited for my response. But I couldn't look at her. Not after everything. Renee's gaze finally shifted toward me, but her lips didn't curve in sympathy, in comfort. No, they curled into something colder, sharper. "I can't live with a loser," she said, her voice soft but cutting. "Should have listened to your brother when he said you'd never make it." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I didn't even respond. Instead, I reached into my pocket and felt the small lightest keychain I'd carried for years. It had been my mother's gift, back when she still had a voice in this family, before her dreams were drowned in the endless tide of Mercer money. She'd told me it was for when I got lost. "Pack your bags," Dad said, standing up, his chair scraping against the floor like thunder. "You're done embarrassing this family." Colby stood, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Let me help him out." I didn't move. The room felt like it was spinning, but I stayed still, the storm outside mirroring the chaos inside me. My eyes locked with Renee's one last time. She reached for her ring, her fingers slow and deliberate, and when she slid it off, the soft clink of metal against porcelain felt like a final nail in the coffin of everything I thought I had. I didn't say a word, I just slipped my coat off and walked out. The door slammed behind me, and I stepped into the rain, the cold soaking into my clothes. It was like the storm had moved inside me, swallowing me whole. As I made my way to the car, Colby's voice followed me. "No hard feelings, little brother," he called, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The house behind me, with all its gold and coldness, glowed and had already forgotten me. I drove. The world outside blurred, streaked with rain, but inside me, everything was crystal clear. I kept hearing my father's voice, the words, "Failures don't belong here," echoing in my mind, but now they didn't sound like his voice anymore. They sounded like mine. Somewhere between the estate and the coast, I stopped at a light that never seemed to change. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the face staring back, But then, in a quiet moment of clarity, I realized something. He was right, I thought. Not in the way he meant. I didn't belong in their world anymore. The rain had softened by the time I pulled up to the gate at beachfront house, the one they didn't know existed. The gate creaked open, and I parked, letting the sound of the waves crashing against the shore fill the silence. I sat there for a long time, my fingers still gripping the lighthouse keychain. I whispered to myself, let's see who the real failure is. And for the first time that night, I felt something like peace. The storm hadn't stopped, it had only moved inside me. The house was quiet when I arrived, the kind of stillness seemed to settle deep into the bones. The storm had passed, leaving behind the sharp scent of wet earth and the cold of the ocean. The air, heavy with salt, clung to my skin as I stepped out of the car. The gate creaked shut behind me, and the waves crashed relentlessly against the shore, a constant reminder that nothing ever stays still for long. I hadn't been back to this place in months. Not since I bought it, not since I'd made it mine. The Mercer family mansion, with its cold marble floors and carefully curated walls, had never felt like home. But this house, the one no one knew about, the one I'd bought with money no one cared to trace, this had always been mine, even when they thought they had everything. The door clicked behind me, and the familiar scent of old wood and sea air filled my lungs. The floor creaked underfoot as I made my way inside. The place was small compared to the mansion, but it was perfect in its simplicity. The walls were lined with old books, the furniture mismatched but comfortable. It felt like a sanctuary, away from all the judgments and expectations that had come with my last name. I let out a long breath, the kind of release that only too many days spent choking on anger and pride. I was done with them. Done with their expectations. The only thing, their game. The only thing I had left to figure out was what came next. The rain had softened to a light drizzle, tapping gently against the windows, a lullaby of sorts that encouraged me to sit, to pause. I dropped my coat on the couch, its dampness a reminder of night's emotional weight. The chill in the air couldn't cut through the fire still smoldering inside me. I went into the kitchen, the tile cool under my feet as I opened the cabinet. A bottle of bourbon, sitting untouched for months, stared back at me. I poured myself a glass, the amber liquid catching the light from the fading day. I didn't drink often, didn't need to, but tonight felt different. It felt like the first time in ages I could afford without holding it. I sat on the couch, the glass warm in my hand, and stared out the window. The house felt so far removed from everything that had happened. In a way, it was everything. It was the answer I hadn't realized I'd been searching for. There was no grand plan, no polished veneer of success. This house was mine, bought and paid for with my own hands, a place where I could finally be free. The phone buzzed on the table, dragging me out of my thoughts. I glanced at it, then picked it up, my thumb lingering over the screen. It was Marcus, an old friend from college. He'd reached out a few times over the years, but this was the first time in months. I had almost forgotten about him. Gavin. His voice was tentative, almost like he wasn't sure if I'd pick up.
Hey.
Man. Just wanted to see how you were holding up. I didn't say anything for a moment, my thumb still frozen on the screen. It felt strange, hearing someone reach out like this. Like I wasn't completely alone, like someone still cared. I finally replied, the words coming out colder than I meant. Just trying to figure it all out. You've been through a lot, he said. I could hear the concern in his voice, but it didn't feel like pity. It was something else. I know it's hard, man, but you can't keep running away from it. I'm not running, I muttered, then took a sip from the glass in my hand. I just don't need to be around them anymore, you know. I don't need their approval. Marcus was quiet for a moment as if weighing his words. I get it. But what are you going to do now? You've got that house, you've got the space. Maybe it's time to make something of it. Your own way. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The idea was simple, but it felt like a mountain. I'd never to build anything from the ground up before. I'd always been the heir, the son, the one who was supposed to follow the path they laid out for me. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I had something else inside me, something they couldn't take away. I'll figure it out, I said, more to myself than to him. I just need time. Time's one thing you've got, Marcus replied. But you have to decide what to do with it. Don't waste it, Gavin. I hung up a few minutes later, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure what my next move was, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going back. Not to their world, not to their rules. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. The days that followed felt like a blur. I spent hours going over everything I had, searching for something, anything, that could help me recall it was mine. The paperwork, the contracts, the old blueprints for Mercer Analytics. It was all there, buried in dusty files on my laptop. I have everything I needed, but it wasn't enough just to have the documents. I needed to make them see. I needed them to understand that they couldn't erase me so easily. I wasn't some footnote in their empire. I was part of it. I was the one who built it. And I wasn't about to let them forget. That night, after a long day of digging through old files, I sat in the quiet of the house, a cup of coffee in hand. The ocean roared outside, but inside there was nothing but silence. I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. Not the peace of surrender, but the peace of knowing I was to fight for everything I had been denied. The storm was over, but the real battle was just beginning. The days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. I spent most of my time in the small, cluttered study at the back of the house, the window looking out onto the waves as they crashed against the shore. The rhythmic sound of the ocean was constant, soothing even, but it couldn't quiet the noise in my head. The questions. The uncertainty. What was I going to do? What was my next move? I had spent too many years hiding in my father's shadow, letting him decide what I was worth. Now, for the first time, I was looking at the world through my own eyes. And there it was, right in front of me, proof that I belonged to something bigger than the life they had planned for me. I pulled up the old documents on my laptop, the one that had sat in a drawer for months, gathering dust. When I'd first started with Mercer Analytics, I'd been the one to write the algorithms, the one to build the foundation that made the company what it was. And yet, somehow, they had managed to erase me from the story. My name wasn't on the papers. My contributions were buried deep beneath layers of corporate gloss, but I had kept a record. I always had. The screen flickered to life, and I saw it again, the old email exchanges, the patent filings with my name listed as the co-founder. The designs for the algorithm that had launched the company into the stratosphere. I'd been there from the start, and yet they acted as if I were some afterthought. My finger hovered over the mouse. I could feel the anger start to build, deep in my chest. The fire that had been smoldering since the night they kicked me out of the mansion, since Renee left, since my father had branded me a failure. I could feel it all, every word, every glance that ever made me feel less than them, less than the Mercer name. It was all pouring into me now. And for the first time, I wasn't fighting it. I opened another folder. The documents were there, buried are years of digital files, but they were there. The original contracts, signed in my name, detailing my involvement with the company. The ones that proved I was the one who had pushed for the patent, who had negotiated the first round of funding. They couldn't take this away from me. As I scrolled through the pages, I could almost hear my photos in my head, telling me how much I would never amount to. How I would never live up to his expectations. How I had always been in the shadow of Colby, the perfect son. That this wasn't about Colby. This wasn't about anyone else. This was about me. I pulled up a legal form, the kind that required signatures. It was the document I had been looking for. My name was still there, buried beneath the fine print, tucked away in a corner. A co-founder. My hands trembled as I read the words again. This was it. This was the piece of the puzzle I needed to take back was mine. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen. The waves outside continued their unrelenting crash, a constant reminder that the world never stopped moving. I clicked the file closed and leaned back in the chair. It was almost too easy, too quiet. I hadn't planned on this. I didn't want to destroy them. I didn't want to burn the family to the ground. But I realized then that the choice wasn't mine. The moment they made me disappear from the company, the moment they pushed me out of the family, they had made their decision. And now, I had the power to make mine. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at it, surprised by the sudden intrusion. It was a message from Sarah Cooper, my childhood friend. Sorna knew me before the Mercer name meant anything. "Gavin, you doing okay?" she asked. I ran a hand through my hair. the weight of the day pressing down on me. I hadn't been okay in a long time, but now, for the first time, I could finally breathe. "I'm getting there," I replied, my fingers moving quickly over the screen. "Just figuring things out. You've got this, you know," Sarah said, the message feeling like a warm hug from miles away. "Don't let them win." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd never been one to lean on anyone, not in the way she was offering. I wasn't sure I was ready to let anyone in, not yet, but I appreciated her reaching out. She had always believed me, even when I didn't. Even when I doubted myself. I closed the phone and stood up, stretching my arms above my head. The night was closing in, the sky darkening as the stars began to prick the surface of the sky. I needed to do something. I needed to make a move. The documents were a start, but now I needed a plan. I needed to make them see me. Not the failure they want to be, but the man I had become. I grabbed the old briefcase I'd used in my early days with the company. It felt familiar in my hand, like an old friend I'd left behind. I hadn't used it in years, but it felt right tonight. I tossed a few files inside the documents, the legal pay, a few other things I would need. There was no turning back now. It was time to show them who the real failure was. I headed out of the house, my footsteps crunching on the gravel drive. The air was cool, the ocean breeze sharp against my skin. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this, nothing would ever be the same again. The silence of the house was a heavy blanket, one I was still getting used to. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made the emptiness feel more pronounced. I hadn't been in the house long, but already it had become my refuge, a place where the nose of the world didn't reach me. The Mercer family's world, the one I had grown up, was full of expectations and judgments. It was suffocating. Here, I could breathe, I could think. But the stillness also gave room for everything I'd been running from to come rushing back. The night after I found the proof, my name on those early contracts, buried under the fine print, I hardly slept. I spent hours scrolling through files, the soft glow of the screen illuminating the darkened room. The storm outside had passed, but inside, the tension was as thick as ever. My father's words kept running through my mind over and over, "Failures don't belong here." I could still feel the weight of them pressing down on my chest. But now, there was something different. There was power in knowing that what they had taken from me could be returned. I wasn't going to be erased. Not anymore. By morning, the house was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting a pale glow across the room. The air smelled of salt water and fresh wood. I stood at the window for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore, their constant motion a reminder of how the world didn't stop, no matter how much you wanted it to. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. The rich, bitter scent filled the air as I sat down at the small wooden table, the kind that didn't belong in the Mercer mansion. It was simple, sturdy, exactly what I needed. I wasn't the man I'd been before, the one who had spent years chasing after approval that would never come. Now, I was just trying to figure out what came next. My phone buzzed again. It was Marcus. He'd checked in on me the night before, but I hadn't really responded. I hadn't known what to say. What could I say? I didn't even know what I was doing yet. I swiped the screen and read the message. "How's it going about? What's next?" Thinking about what was next. I hadn't stopped thinking about it. I just hadn't figured out how to answer the question. I typed back quickly. "I found something. Proof. It's time to make them see me." It wasn't just about taking back what was mine. It wasn't about revenge. I had to remind myself of that. This wasn't about sinking to their level, proving them wrong just to watch them crumble. It was about ownership. About standing up for what they thought could take away. What are you going to do with it?" Marcus responded. The question hung in the air as I stared at the screen. What was I going to do with it? I could burn them to the ground, expose everything, what my father had done, what Colby had taken credit for. But that wouldn't change anything. It would just make me as bad as them. Instead, I decided to start slow. I wasn't going to make a spectacle of this. I wasn't going to flaunt my power or force them to see what they'd done. I would do it quietly, with precision. They had erased me, burned my name, but the truth would come out. It had to. And when it did, they would have no choice but to recognize me for what I truly was, a part of the company, a part of the legacy they had tried to bury. I pulled out the documents again, the ones that proved my role in the company's foundation. I thought about everything I had built with my own hands, algorithms, the ideas that had turned into products, the sleepless nights I had spent perfecting the code, the strategies. All of it had been swept under the rug, but not anymore. I scanned the pages carefully. Some of the dates on the contracts were old, back when I was still wet behind the ears, eager to prove myself to my father. The ink was faded now, but my name was there. My signature was there. This was my work. I had earned my place, and no one could take that away from me. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone. I glanced at the clock, still early. I stood up, walking to the door with slow, deliberate steps. My hand hovered over the knob before I turned it, opening it just wide enough to see who was standing on the other side. It was Sarah. She stood there, her posture as straight as ever, but her eyes were soft, almost apologetic. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, letting her into the house. The space was simple, but it felt like home. Her eyes scanned the room briefly before she turned to me. "You know, I never thought I'd see the day you'd come back here," she said quietly. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure how to answer. I had left this place behind long ago, thinking I was better than it, but now it felt like the place I could truly be myself. I hadn't been here in years, not since I bought the house, and it was already beginning to feel like I'd never left. "I'm doing it, Sarah," I said finally, my voice steady. "I'm taking back what's mine." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like fear in them. "Just be careful," she said, her voice low. "They won't go out to fight." I nodded, a small smile pulling at the corner of my lips. "I know, but I'm not fighting for revenge. I'm fighting for what's rightfully mine." She gave me a long look, almost as if weighing her words. Then, she nodded slowly. "Well, you've got my support. Whatever you need, Gavin." I didn't know what I needed. Not yet, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. I had a plan now, a way forward. The weight that had been pressing down on me felt just a little bit lighter. "I appreciate it," I said quietly. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You've got something they'll never take away," she said. "Don't let them make you forget it." I stood there, letting her words settle into me. The truth, I'd spent years doubting myself, questioning my worth. But I was done with that. I was done with the past, done with the way they had tried to erase me. It was time to take what was mine, not with anger, but with precision. Sarah left soon after, leaving me alone with my thoughts again. The house was still, but I felt the shift inside me. This was the beginning of something new. A new chapter, one where I finally stood on my own 2 feet. The storm, now I was going to rebuild. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and long nights spent staring at my laptop. The weight of it all was settling in, slowly but surely. Each document I uncovered, each contract I reviewed, was like another piece of the falling into place. I had spent years being invisible, hidden beneath the shadow of the Mercer name. Now, everything was coming to the surface. I hadn't realized how much I had buried until I started digging for the files. The folders were full of emails, reports, and notes that I had completely forgotten about. The deeper I went, the more I uncovered: all the late nights, the drafting proposals, the countless hours spent perfecting algorithms, and the meetings where my contributions had been dismissed in favor of Colby's big ideas. It was like watching the foundation of the company I held crumble under the weight of their lies. I wasn't angry, not yet. But I could feel something building inside me, a quiet storm, as I realized just how much they had stolen from me. It wasn't just the company, the title, or the money. It was the years of my life, spent chasing approval that would never come. The realization hit me hard. I had been nothing more than a pawn in their game, a tool for their ambition. I opened a file I hadn't seen in years, a folder, Layla Tiggs' initial patent documents. It was dated back to the early days, when the idea of the company was still just a dream. My name was there, along with Colby's and my father's, but it was my contributions that had made it possible. My strategy, my vision. Yet they had erased me from the narrative. I should have been listed as a co-founder, but instead I was buried beneath their names, a footnote in a story they had rewritten for their own glory. As I read through the documents, I could feel my pulse quicken. This wasn't just about getting back what was mine. This was about exposing them, about showing the world what they had done. It wasn't just about the company, it was about my identity. I pulled up a legal template I had found in one of the archives. It was a contract, a non-compete agreement, something that forced them to recognize my involvement. It wasn't enough to just show them the paperwork. I had to make them feel the weight of their actions. I had to make them realize that I wasn't going to disappear quietly. That's when the phone rang. I glanced at the screen and I hadn't spoken to her in months, but I knew that when it came to this, she was one of the few people who could help. She had been there in the early days, when we were building the foundation of the company. She knew how hard I'd worked. "Gavin," she said when I picked up. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the hint of concern. "I've been going over the documents. We've got enough here to force their hand. But we need to move quickly. They're already starting to clean up their records." I swallowed, my throat tight. I know, I found more than enough to take them down. There was a pause on the other end. "This isn't just about the company, is it? This is about your name, about your place in all of this. You've been erased, Gavin, but it's not just business, it's personal." Her words hit home in a way I hadn't expected. I had spent so long thinking about what I wanted to prove to them, to my father, to Colby, but I had never really thought about what this was doing to me. This wasn't just a fight for money or power. It was about who I was. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "I'm doing this because I deserve to be seen." There was a long pause, and I could almost feel Maeve nodding on the other side of the phone. "Then let's make them see you." The decision was made. I didn't need to wait any longer. I had the proof, and I was ready to move. I spent the rest of the day compiling everything I had gathered: contracts, emails, patent filings, meeting minutes, everything that showed my role in the company. It was a mess of digital files, all scattered across different drives, but I knew I could make it work. I wasn't going to leave anything out. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. That night, I sent Maeve everything, the files. Everything that would show the world who I really was. I was ready to make my move, but there was something else I needed to do first. Something personal. I grabbed my coat and walked out of the house, the cold air biting at my skin. The sky was clear, the stars sharp against the blackness of the night. I needed to clear my head before the storm I was about to unleash. I walked along the beach, the sand cool beneath my bare feet. The waves crashed in the distance, their sound steady and unyielding. The lighthouse, standing tall against the horizon, blinked in the darkness. It had always been there, a constant. I stopped for a moment, just watching the light flicker against the dark water. It was a reminder of everything I had fought for, everything had lost. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel it, the weight of everything. The years spent trying to prove myself. The silence from my family. The betrayal from Renee. But beneath it all, there was something else, something stronger. Hope. The storm was coming, but this time, it wasn't going to grate me. I had fought for too long, had been erased for too long, to let it all slip away now. As I turned and walked back to the house, the first light of dawn began to touch the sky. I didn't look back at the ocean, at the lighthouse, or at the past. It was time to move forward. I was ready. The storm had passed, but I could still feel its aftermath. The quiet of the house was different now, filled with anticipation, like the air just before a thunderclap. I had set the wheels in motion, and there was no going back. The plan was in place. All I had to do now was wait. Maeve had received everything I'd sent her: the contracts, the emails, the patent filings, the meeting minutes that proved my role, Mercer Analytics. She had the documents, the proof that I was not the failure made me out to be. But this wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about getting back what was mine. This was about making them face the truth. The phone buzzed on the table again, pulling me from my thoughts. I picked it up, the screen lit up with a message from Maeve. "It's time. They're already feeling the heat. Let's do this." I stared at the words for a moment. There was no hesitation in her message. She was ready, and now so was I. I stood up, pacing the room for a moment, the weight of the decision settling into my bones. The game had changed. This wasn't just a business move. It wasn't about saving face anymore. This was about control, about showing them that I was still a part of this world, that I had never been the failure they claimed me to be. I grabbed my laptop, opening it to the legal motions Maeve and I had been working the past few days. The motion wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was something more subtle, something that would force their hand without tipping them off too soon. An emergency injunction, a freeze on Mercer Analytics assets, citing suspicious asset transfers and potential misapplication of co-founder rights. Nothing overt, nothing too obvious. Just enough to make them uncomfortable, to make them feel the pressure. I hit send. The documents were filed. The first step was done. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The waves were calm now, their rhythmic crashing a soft lullaby in the background. The world was still, but I knew things were about to get loud. The next few days were a blur. I watched as the ripple effect of the injunction started to take shape. News of the motion began to leak, first to the investors, then to the business world at large. The calls started coming in, the emails piling up in my inbox, all asking the same question: what was happening at Mercer Analytics? I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. I needed them to feel the uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. I needed them to start questioning everything they thought they knew about me, about the company, about the very foundation they had built. And then, it happened. I was sitting on the porch, the sun setting behind me, when the phone rang again. This time it was from a number I didn't recognize. I picked it up, my heart beating faster than it should. Then, "Mr. Mercer," a voice on the other end said, sharp and professional. "This is Mrs. Whitmore, executive assistant to Mr. Graham Mercer. He would like to formally request that you sign a non-compete agreement regarding any future ventures with technology companies." I raised an eyebrow, amused at how quickly they were scrambling. "Tell him I've already signed something better." The line went quiet for a moment before she responded, her tone colder than before. "I'll relay your message, Mr. Mercer." The call ended abruptly. I set the phone down, smiling to myself. They were starting to feel it. The tide was turning, and they were beginning to panic. Later that evening, as I was making dinner, Maeve's name flashed across my phone again. I answered quickly. "Lyall, you're not going to believe this," she said, her voice breathless. "I just got an encrypted email from the legal team. They're already trying to erase the board minutes, the ones that prove your involvement with the company. They're moving fast." I could hear the urgency in her voice, but I wasn't surprised. I had expected this. They weren't just going to let this slide. But I wasn't going to let them erase the truth. "There's Theru said," the words coming out slowly, deliberately. "Let them clean house. The more they try, the more they'll expose themselves." Maeve was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost hesitant. "Are you sure you're ready for this? If you push them too hard, they'll fight back. You could lose everything." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I wasn't sure I was ready for everything that was about to happen, but I knew I couldn't stop now. "I've already lost everything," I said. "What do I have to lose now?" Maeve didn't say anything for a long while. When she finally spoke, her voice was tinged with something else. "All right, then let's do this." The next morning, the storm that had been brewing finally broke. The email came through an attachment that made my heart skip. It was a scanned copy of a founding agreement for Mercer Analytics. My name was listed as a co-founder, legally binding. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment they would know I really was. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked the mouse, but it was new I felt. It was something else, something I hadn't felt in years. I was finally taking control. I called Maeve again, the urgency in my voice now clear. "It's done. They can't race me now. They've got no choice but to face the truth." She paused, then sighed. "This is just the beginning, but you've got them cornered. They won't be able to lie their way out of this." I hung up the phone and leaned back in the chair, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The battle wasn't over, but the first blow had been struck. I was no longer just a man with a past to bury. I was a force to be reckoned with, and they were about to learn that. The day after I sent the final documents, the weight of everything I'd set in motion began to sink in. The phone calls came nonstop, one after another, each one louder than the last. News outlets had picked up the story, and the word was spreading. My name was on the tip of everyone's tongue again, but not in the way they had ever expected. I sat on the porch, the cool morning air biting at my skin, and watched as the first few rays of the sun cut through the darkness. The silence was overwhelming, almost as if the world was holding its breath. I hadn't heard from my family, not yet. I didn't expect to. They were still reeling from the injunction, from the freeze on their assets, and the questions from the investors. I could almost feel the panic in the air, like a pressure bump inside their glass house, waiting to burst. I checked my phone. Maeve had sent a message. It's happening. The panic's already setting in. Your father's losing it. They've called an emergency meeting with the board. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. It wasn't not getting revenge, not anymore. It was about forcing them to recognize the truth. They had ignored it for so long, pretending I was just some failure. But now they had no choice but to face it. The phone rang and I saw Maeve's name flash across the screen. I answered quickly, not bothering to greet her. Tell me, I said, my voice calm, controlled. It's worse than I thought, she replied, her voice tight with tension. Graham's not taking this well at all. He's meeting with the investors, trying to spin the story. He's already trying to discredit you, talking about your erratic behavior. It's all over the news now. I sighed, a bitter laugh escaping me. Of course. They can't. They were wrong. They'll try to bury me again, but they won't be able to. The evidence is there. Maeve was silent for a moment. You know what this means, right? They'll go after you. If you push too hard, it won't just be business. It'll be personal. I could feel the tension in my chest tightening, but I refused to back down now. Let them. They've already done everything they can to destroy me. What do I have to lose? She exhaled slowly, a mix of disbelief and admiration in her voice. You're sure about this? This isn't just about taking them down. It's about everything you've worked for. I thought about it for a moment. The company. The years I had spent building something that would never be credited to me. My father's voice, always cold, always condemning. I had spent too long chasing after their approval, waiting for a place in a family that would never accept me. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about standing up for myself. I'm assured, my voice steady. I've made my peace with it. The conversation ended, and I was left alone with my thoughts again. The house was quiet, the calm before the storm. I knew my father would come for me, that Colby would try to outsmart me. They would try to bury the truth, just like they had always done. But I wasn't going to let them. I spent the rest of the day working through the legalities, getting everything in order. Maeve was coordinating with the lawyers, making sure that every move I made was calculated, precise. We couldn't afford to make a mistake. They would come after me, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. By evening, the calls started coming from the Mercer family. My father, of course, was the first. His voice, sharp and demanding, came through the phone. You think you can just destroy everything I've built? He spat, his words dripping with venom. You think you can tear down the family empire and walk away unscathed? I wasn't surprised by the anger in his voice. He was used to being in control, used to having everything go his way. But this time he had underestimated me. I'm not tearing anything down, I said, my voice calm despite the fire rising in my chest. I'm exposing the truth. Your empire is built on lies. And I'm not going to let you get away with it any longer. You'll regret this, Lyle, he hissed, his tone threatening. You don't know what you're dealing with. I felt a twinge of something, maybe fear, maybe just exhaustion, but I didn't let it show. Maybe, I said, my voice low, but I've already lost everything. What more can you take from me? The call ended abruptly, but I knew this was just the beginning. My father's words lingered in the air, like a shadow hanging over me. I wasn't afraid of any more, though. Not after everything that had happened. I leaned back in the chair, my fingers tapping against him as I thought about what came next. The fight wasn't over. It wasn't going to be easy. But I had already made my choice. I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. They had tried to break me, to erase me from their world, but now I was in control. The truth would come out, and when it did, they would have no choice but to face it. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Mr. Mercer. The voice on the other end said, smooth and professional. We're calling to inform you that your father has requested an emergency meeting with the board. There are some concerns regarding the allegations you've made. We need to discuss this immediately. I could feel my pulse quicken. They were moving fast, trying to control the narrative, trying to turn the tables before I could get the upper hand. But they wouldn't succeed. Not this time. I'll be there, I said, my voice steady though my mind raced. This was it. The real battle had begun. And I was ready. The silence in the house felt suffocating. The morning after the meeting with the board, everything seemed to have shifted. It was as if the calm before the storm had been replaced with unbearable stillness, each tick of the clock louder than the last. The Mercer family was no longer a well-oiled machine. It was a fractured empire, collapsing under the weight of its lies. I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee cold, staring out the window at the ocean. The view should have been peaceful, but all I could see was the reflection of my own turmoil. I had pushed them, exposed them, and now the consequences were rippling through the family. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The phone buzzed on the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. I didn't have to look at the screen to know it was Maeve. She'd been the one to help me put the pieces together, the one who'd believed in me when no one else did. She had been my anchor through all of this. I answered the call. What's happening? Gavin. Her voice was tight, the tension clear even to the phone. The fallout is bigger than we expected. Your father, investors are pulling out, and there's already talk of a full audit. The media is picking up on it. They're digging into Mercer Analytics like they're sharks in a fiend frenzy. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of it all crashing down on me. The fight was just beginning. I had exposed the truth. But now I was going to have to weather the storm that came with it. I wasn't afraid, not really. But I had to admit the reality, it was starting to sink in. Is he blaming me? I asked. I knew the answer before she even said it. Oh, of course he is. Your father doesn't take responsibility for anything, especially not for this. Maeve replied, her voice tinged with frustration. He's already calling you a traitor. He's threatening legal action, but honestly, it's all smoke and mirrors. They're scared, Gavin. They know they've lost. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in my chest loosen just a little. Good. Let them feel it. Let them realize they can't hide behind their lies anymore. Let them be careful, Maeve warned. They'll fight dirty. If you push too hard, they'll try to ruin you in ways you can't imagine. They'll pull out every weapon they have. I'm not backing down, I said, my voice steady. I've already lost everything. There's nothing left for them to take. Maeve was silent for a long moment. You're sure about this? She asked quietly. I wasn't sure about a lot of things. I was sure about this. I'd spent my whole life trying to please them, trying to prove my worth. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to play by their rules. I'm sure. I've come this far, and I'm not turning back now. The next few days were a whirlwind. The media storm hit hard and fast, just as I expected. Headlines splashed across the front pages of every major outlet. Mercer family under investigation, allegations of corporate fraud, and CEO's son exposes family empire's lease. Mercer Analytics, scandal or justice? It felt surreal seeing my name in print like that. They had tried to bury me, to erase me from everything, but now I was front and center. I didn't feel any satisfaction from it, not like I thought I would. Instead, it was just a quiet confirmation of everything I had known. They had never cared about the truth, only their image. But now the truth was all that mattered. My father's responses were predictable. He had denied everything, claimed the allegations were baseless, and attacked me personally, accusing me of being bitter and trying to tear apart the family. But the damage was done. Investors were pulling out, and the board was in disarray. His empire was crumbling, and I was standing at the center of it, holding the pieces together. The phone rang again, and this time it was my mother. Her voice was quiet when she spoke, almost hesitant, as if she were afraid of what I might say. Lyle, I don't know what's happening, but this isn't the way it should be, she said. Your father is beside himself. He's not sleeping, not eating. He's convinced that you're trying to destroy everything. Please, you have to stop this. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange mix of guilt and relief. My mother had always been the peacekeeper, the one who tried to smooth things over. But I had never been able to fit into that mold. I had always been the one who couldn't live up to their expectations. You know what he's like, Mom, I said softly. He's always been this way. Nothing was ever enough for him. I'm not doing this to destroy him. I'm doing this to finally be seen. To take back what's mine. I understand, she whispered. But your father, he's your father. And no matter what happens, he's not the same man he used to be. Please, Lyle, think about what you're doing. Her words hit harder than I expected. I had spent so long resenting my father, blaming him for Guy, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I still craved his approval. It wasn't about revenge. It was about proving to him that I wasn't just the ferret he always saw me as. But hearing my mother's voice, soft and pleading, made me wonder if there was another way. I can't undo what's been done, Mom, I said, my voice tight. But I'm not going to back down now, not after everything. There was a long silence before she spoke again. I know, Lyle, I know. Just be careful. When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring at the ocean. The waves were still crashing, relentless and unyielding, just like everything that had happened. But now, as I looked out at the horizon, I knew that I had a choice. I could keep pushing, keep fighting, or I could let it all go. And for the first time in years, I felt something else besides anger. I felt the smallest spark of hope, the kind that came with knowing I wasn't the man my father wanted to be. I was someone else now. Someone stronger. The phone rang again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Mav. We've got a meeting with the board tomorrow, she said. They're trying to make a deal to avoid further scandal. But we need to be ready. This could be the final blow. I stood up, the weight of it all settling in once again. Tomorrow would be the day that decided everything. I wasn't them, let them win, not this time. We'll be ready, I said. Let's finish this. The sun had set by the time I hung up, and the house was quiet once again. But I wasn't afraid. This time I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I was going to take back what was mine. And when the morning came, I would be ready to make them see me.